Good morning. I'm Della Bynum, your worship associate this morning. Welcome. Yeah, that's working. Welcome to the worship with the community of First Unitarian Church of Omaha. I'm Della Bynum, and I'm serving as your worship associate this morning. We are glad that you have chosen to join us for worship today. Whether you are attending in line or in person, your presence here is always welcome. I want to extend a special welcome to visitors. If you're joining us online, we encourage you to say hello and chat with others online. And for those here in person, I'm going to ask you to take a moment to greet and demonstrate love to the people sitting around you. Sometimes just a kind of look or handshake. This congregation works really hard to be an inclusive community that listens, engages, inspires, and acts. Our mission is to foster the whole person with compassion and justice. We are on many journeys, but together we are all one church. We are a community of all ages and abilities, with a rainbow of gender and sexual identities, and diverse cultures and classes and backgrounds. We draw from many sources of inspiration and share common liberal religious values. Whoever you may be, we welcome you to bring your whole self into this community. We want to remind everyone that there is a book in the back of the church where you can share your joys and concerns. We will convey those joys and concerns, and in the process, make it a part of our community and worship. For those online, feel free to use the online comments to share your joys and concerns. We welcome everyone to share in coffee and conversation after the service. We will be gathering downstairs in the common room. If you parked in the garage to the west, we have a parking validation in the foyer. It's to the right as you enter the door. We also affirm that our church occupies the traditional treaty land of the Omaha and Otoe, Missouri tribes and nations, and express our respect to the Northern Ponca tribe, Winnebago tribe, and Santee Sioux tribes. Please join us in giving voice to and supporting local causes, charities, and rights of these indigenous tribes. Now will Kate Bryan come forward and light the chalice? Life, all creation, as we kindle this flame, we rekindle our connection to the sacred web of life. Thank you. Well, we have announcements from we have announcements this morning from David Richardson and Diana Bird.
Thank you and good morning. I wanted to bring everybody up to date on what UU The Vote, our social justice group, has been doing. The number of rallies and speakers and things that we've gone to is probably too lengthy to go into here, but we've been doing a lot. And if you want to know what we are doing, check out the Friday e-blast. We always put some updates on what has been happening and what will be happening in that venue. You can also get on our UU The Vote email list. You can do that by contacting me or Melissa Gibson, and we'll make sure that you get on that list. One of the things we have done, we've moved our meeting dates. We typically met on Thursday or Tuesday of the third Tuesday of the month. That conflicts with movie night, so we're going to move. we will be meeting on Thursdays, the third Thursday of the month. So that means our October meeting will be on 10/16. It's at 6:30 on Zoom. Again, if you want to get on the list, let me know. The October meeting will be on the 20th. A couple of upcoming events. On 9/28 is Sunday Fun Day, which will be at Hanscom Park, 34th and Leavenworth, which isn't too far from here, and it's like 1 in the afternoon till 4, I think. We aren't sponsoring this activity, but I think a lot of people would be interested in meeting the candidates who will be there. Candidates are, as you notice, if you're watching the news, they're already starting to campaign. And there may be a gathering in Kearney, Nebraska on the 8th of November. Stay tuned on that one. It's co-sponsored by ACLU and UUSJ, the Unitarian Universalist Social Justice Group. Also, next Sunday, we will have a petition down in the common room during coffee hour to send to Governor Pillen expressing opposition to the use of the work ethic camp as a detention center for immigrants. And if you're interested in signing that, check it out, and we'll see that it gets to our governor. Speaking of ACLU, I can't pass this sort of historical factoid on. UU has long had relationships with the ACLU, especially this church. The Nebraska chapter of ACLU was founded by Reverend Vester Vanstrom, who was a settled minister here back in the 60s and 70s. His co-founder was Reverend Charles Stephen, who was the longtime minister at the Lincoln Unitarian Church. Couldn't avoid the historical factoid, sorry.
Good morning. I'm Diana Bird, and I'm here with a message to let you know what your Board of Trustees has been up to. The Board of Trustees met for the 2025 board retreat in the middle of August and formulated the annual Vision of Ministry, AVOM, as prescribed by board policy. The AVOM is a short list of priorities to be accomplished in the forthcoming year. The board finalized approval during the last board meeting, and it'll now be turned over to the MTC and church to translate into an action plan. I'll just give you a quick list of the 4 items, and I'll let you know that you can also check them out in the e-blast on Friday, and I think there's going to be a blog post from your president, Sherry Connor. The 25-26 AVOM is, number 1, simplify governance, right-sizing to the congregation. Number 2, promoting a stronger intra-congregational community. Number 3, social justice, partnerships with and service to the wider community. Number 4, promoting and achieving a more sustainable financial management process. Thank you.
Well, today is Bob Bosco's birthday. Can we say happy birthday? He's in the back. Could we sing happy birthday to him?
There's been a slight misunderstanding. It actually is Dan Sullivan's birthday today.
Oh, that's wonderful. Well, would you like to sing happy birthday to our members who have birthdays today? Happy birthday to you. Happy birthday to you. Happy birthday, dear. Happy birthday to you. Thank you. Okay. Now let me see. This is the 11th week of Reverend Sherry's sabbatical. We trust that the The candle lighting, the sabbatical candle, will light her way back to us. Our sabbatical minister is Reverend Dennis McCarty.
What the serpent really told Eve. The calculations of astrophysicists tell us that there are what they call islands of unimaginably dense matter deep within supermassive black holes, which lie at the same time on the very surfaces of those same black holes. We learn that for all its vastness, our cosmos is better thought of in 2 dimensions, as a flat plane, rather than the 3 dimensions we believe we perceive. The mathematics of quantum entanglement tell us that what we perceive to be vast distances between 2 particles is an illusion. They abide closer each to the other than 2 fingers on the same hand. We calculate the universe, weigh its vastness, measure the spectrum of its brilliance, or at least we think we do, but all we learn is that with each new insight expands it farther beyond our power to imagine. Our very answers become questions in themselves the better we understand them. Are these not miracles? Is this not richness, that in the very moment of calculation's triumph, extending our reach to worlds beyond all old knowledge, we learn, most of all over again, how tiny we have always been, and how many more questions we have than we ever guessed when first we began asking them. In the very instant of thinking we truly understand something, our understanding sheds its skin like a marvelous metaphysical serpent to reveal once more how wonderful our wonder is, how powerful our wonder is, how healing our wonder is. Come, let us worship together. And I invite you to stand as you're willing and able and join in singing our opening hymn, number 146, Soon the Day Will Arrive.
Day
Let the horizon of our minds encompass those who have come before us, all those with whom we now share our planet, and also those who come after us. For the first left us their memories, the fruits of their plantings, our very image of who we are. What we who live today shape, what we do, but also what we leave undone, will nourish or blight the lives of all who follow. The offering will now be received. Each week, half of the cash currency in the offering plate is donated to a local cause as a loving blessing upon our community. Our Share the Plate recipient for today is Nebraska Abortion Resources Fund. Our service devoted to care and centering. As kind of the new kid in town, I do have a question. Do you normally stand to sing the centering hymn, or do you sing it seated? Okay. Thank you. Good procedural tip. Our practice on care and centering in this congregation is to give folks a couple of musical minutes to write your joys and concerns in the book at the back of the sanctuary if you haven't already done so, or if you would prefer, place a stone in the collective chalice in the front and join silently with others in the community. And if you're watching online, you can put your trial or triumph in the comments to be read aloud. From Elaine Wells, thank you. Thanks again for everyone who attended the Jim Scott multimedia presentation last Saturday. Someone inadvertently took my favorite flower bowl. Oh no. After the potluck party, it's round with a square top that has oriental designs. Please let me know where it is. Thank you. Now, I invite you to join in singing our centering song for this morning, number 123, Spirit of Life. I could just stand and listen to the orchestra or the organ all morning. You're stuck with me, though. Our reading this morning comes from this book, the Routledge Handbook of Epistemic Injustice, and I'll get to that, but I'm going to start by quoting one of my favorite theological magazines, Scientific American. A recent Scientific American editorial noted that, quote, objectively speaking, we are living through a dumpster fire of a historical moment. We need to guard against lowering our standards for normalcy. We must stand up for the silenced and stand with the silence breakers. We must double down on our duty to know, to speak up, and to remember. Which brings us to this book, the Routledge Handbook of Epistemic Injustice, which is a large academic tome full of long words and complex ideas. But it really, and I think you have it on the back of your order of service too, comes down to this word on the written across the person's hand on the cover: listen. Just listening. In this era of information and communication, issues of misinformation and miscommunication are more pressing than ever. We need to remember to ask who has a voice and who doesn't. Our voices interacting with equal agency and power. Who is being understood and who isn't, and who is being believed, and who is even being acknowledged and engaged with. Epistemic injustice refers to those forms of unfair treatment that relate to issues of knowledge, understanding, and participation. And these issues include a wide range of topics, including the following: exclusion and silencing, being treated as though you were invisible, having your meanings or contributions systematically distorted, misheard, or misrepresented, and several others. The topic of epistemic injustice is a very rich one in at least three ways. The first is that it brings together many topics, debates, and traditions in philosophy. The second is that epistemic injustice connects to major social and intellectual movements such as feminism, hermeneutics, critical race theory, disability studies, and decolonializing queer and trans epistemologies. In sociological terms, it's very intersectional. The third source of richness for epistemic injustice lies in the fact of its status as a pervasive feature of our social and professional lives. In other words, it's everywhere you look. Unfortunately, the socio-historical context of the European philosophical traditions, what some people call the Western Enlightenment tradition, is rife with epistemic injustices, many of which have affected philosophy itself. Epistemic justice might therefore require not just closer engagement with philosophical traditions and ideas from the wider non-European world, but also critical thinking and self-examination, a task informed by feminist, post-colonial, decolonial, and critical race theories that might offer not only pluralism and perspective, but also epistemic justice. And I will now proceed to translate that into English. And I'll begin with a disturbing story. One evening, back in 1993, two young black men were waiting at a bus stop in London, England. 6 white teenagers on the other side of the street began to shout at them, and one of the black men, Dwayne Brooks, got scared and began to run, and then to Brooks's horror, the young men charged across the street, caught Brooks's friend, Stephen Lawrence, and stabbed him to death. Police quickly arrived, and I believe the officers did intend to solve the crime. They had good intentions, but they assumed they already knew what had happened, a gang fight. They assumed that rather than being victims of deadly violence, the two black men had been participants equally responsible for the violence inflicted upon them. And while the police were interrogating Dwayne Brooks, Stephen Lawrence's murderers got clean away. Witnesses came forward to explain what had happened, and it turned out that the white gang had been on a rampage attacking black people that whole evening. Even so, 20 years went by before the murderers were even brought to trial. And it was so messed up, this was England, remember, Parliament called for an inquiry. They found that the officers had violated their own written procedures. They had failed to provide aid to the crime victims. Dwayne Brooks had tried to tell them what happened, but they ignored his information. Brooks knew what had happened, but because of bias against him as a black man, police refused to listen. And the inquiry found that the root cause was, of course, entrenched structural racism in London's police force. And with structural racism, like a lot of structural isms, good intentions are not the problem. But because of their own biases, which many officers denied they even had, they were, in fact, treating people of color differently from other citizens. This sort of thing happens all the time, of course, on both sides of the Atlantic. Black citizens here in the United States complain that they are treated differently by police, by other agencies, and even by the medical establishment. And returning to Scientific American, scientific research has confirmed that those complaints are, in fact, accurate. Nor does this kind of unequal treatment apply just to black people. The same prejudices play out in various forms for all people of color, as well as for gender nonconforming people, people with disabilities, and still, all too often, women. Feminist philosopher Miranda Fricker tells this story as an example of what she calls testimonial epistemic injustice. Epistemology is the study of knowledge, how we learn, what we learn, and in this case, what we think we know that is just not true, but which prevents us from finding out what we need to know. Testimonial epistemic injustice, big words, but they describe a common part of the human experience. The human brain uses unconscious shortcuts to process input and make decisions, but because we do this unconsciously, we too often find ourselves acting on cultural assumptions rather than facts. And in this case, biased police assumptions that this had been a gang fight because black men are all violent kept them from hearing the real facts about the crime. Good intentions don't mean much without accountability. Unitarian Universalism refers to itself as a covenantal tradition, but I also submit that our covenantal declarations are not worth much without accountability. Unitarian Universalist theologian James Luther Adams taught that a covenant is a sincere ethical promise willingly entered into by equals. And this is what he said, it is rooted in love, not law. Violation of a covenant is a problem then not because it breaks an enforceable law, but because it's a violation of trust. It's a breach of faith. Covenantal relationship is rooted in love, not law. So, if we're talking about love instead of law, what does accountability even mean for us? And to me, accountability means this. We need to listen, particularly to the people who are easiest to ignore. This might be an individual in an unequal relationship or a whole population. People of color, LGBTQ plus people, people with disabilities, and let's not forget children, old people, and women. That's testimonial epistemic justice. We could call it listening justly. If we don't listen justly, the other person has every right to name that, and that's accountability. There is another kind of epistemic injustice, what Miranda Fricker calls hermeneutical epistemic injustice, and that's a little harder to explain. In philosophy, hermeneutics is the science of interpretation. Fricker applies this to knowledge and information. And knowledge and information can very much be justice issues. For example, suppose the people in a poor section of town don't have the information they need to register to vote. And if they don't, their right to vote has, in effect, been taken away. And that lack of knowledge is hermeneutic epistemic injustice. Therefore, working to provide that information is hermeneutic justice. One more subtle example of hermeneutic injustice comes from Miranda Fricker herself. We're going to be talking about movies this month and watching a few. And I'll start with this one. She uses the beloved American novel and the movie made from the novel To Kill a Mockingbird as an example of testimonial injustice. A black man, Tom Robinson, is accused of assaulting a white woman in 1930s Alabama. Both he and the novel's hero, Atticus Finch, explained to the jury how that could not have happened. It was physically impossible, but the racist jury refuses to listen to them and convicts him anyway. That's testimonial injustice, unjust listening. But To Kill a Mockingbird itself and the way Fricker uses it are also a pretty powerful example of hermeneutic injustice. For the record, film critic Roger Ebert savaged that movie because of the way the movie and also the book treated its black characters. They have no purpose of their own other than, as Ebert put it, to act as props, quote, backdrops in a story about a brave white liberal, Atticus Finch. Now, this criticism of both the book and the movie still surprises some people, even today. And when I first preached about it in the early 2000s, I got strong pushback. It was very difficult to explain the kind of structural racism that pervades both the book and the movie. And in her writing on epistemic injustice, Miranda Fricker also misses it. Then came groundbreaking black film director Spike Lee, who coined language to explain what was going on. The black handyman, Tom Robinson, is what Lee calls a magical Negro. The magical Negro is only there to help develop a story about the white hero. In To Kill a Mockingbird, once Tom Robinson has fulfilled that function, the plot conveniently kills him off. And none of the white characters worry much about that. He was never more than a prop. His death doesn't really matter to the main point, which is the coming of age of the main character, Scout Finch. Meanwhile, Atticus Finch, the brave white lawyer, is what Spike Lee calls a white savior. The black townsfolk in the story cannot help themselves. Both the novel and the movie apparently assume there were no black lawyers in the 1930s, so the white hero has to bravely step in to try to save Tom Robinson. Now, for the record, there were black law schools and black lawyers in the 1930s. They might have, for example, asked future Supreme Court Justice Thurgood Marshall. He was, during that novel's time frame, just starting out as a crusading civil rights lawyer for the NAACP. and a black lawyer would totally have changed the plot, maybe with Atticus Finch as an assistant. Magical Negroes and white saviors are now recognized as racist cliches. But when Ebert wrote his review, and later when I first preached about it, that language didn't yet exist to explain those concepts. And Miranda Fricker herself didn't pick up on it. And that's what hermeneutic in justice is, a void in information on a justice issue. Now, for the record, To Kill a Mockingbird is a wonderful book, and it's a very fine movie, and both were arguably as anti-racist as they could be in 1962 and still be accepted at all. But they're products of their time. And looking back, we can also now see them as examples how something can be anti-racist on one level, and yet because it failed to challenge the racist assumption that black folks had to be cared for by white folks, it reinforces structural racism, what you might call 1960s white supremacy culture, at a deeper level. And we're learning more about this stuff all the time, and that's what hermeneutic justice is. You might call it learning justice. So we need to have both listening justice and learning justice. Which brings us to something else Miranda Fricker talks about, what she calls the right to contest. The right to contest, the right to be heard if you believe you've been unfairly treated or if you're being denied information you need. The right to contest, she tells us, fundamentally changes a relationship. The more powerful person in the relationship may have good intentions, but they will act differently if they're accountable for their actions toward the less powerful person. And remember, intentionality requires both good intentions plus accountability. They need to go together. Now, there's a tension between the right to contest on one side and what Fricker calls a culture of domination on the other. One example she uses in the United Kingdom is a law passed decades ago that made marital rape a crime. And she explains that even in a marriage where the husband would never even think of committing marital rape, that law changed the institution of marriage. It weakened the patriarchal culture of domination and granted women a greater right to contest across the board. Now, these are big words and academic language, but they're also, as you can see, basic, deeply personal issues often. And they play out every day, all around us. To translate them into everyday English, we need to practice listening justice. We need to practice learning justice. We need to honor the right to contest. The new Article 2 language in our Unitarian Universalist Association bylaws says, in part, and I'm quoting, "Love is the power that holds us together and is at the center of our shared values. We are accountable to one another for doing the work of living our shared values through the spiritual discipline of love." Close quote. We are accountable to one another, which is a discipline. Accountability in covenantal relationships calls us to practice epistemic justice, honoring the right to contest, listening to and learning from one another, particularly marginalized voices. And those voices have much to teach, both in society and within our own religious tradition. And we can lean into the fact that there always is more to learn. I think it's easy to forget sometimes that nationwide, we Unitarian Universalists have thousands of members who are Asian, Hispanic, Indigenous, and or Black. We have thousands of LGBTQ plus members. We have thousands of members with disabilities. And we need to listen to those experiences too. We need to learn from that knowledge. And we haven't always done that as well as we might. In an article about epistemic justice, Mexican sociologist Sylvia Schmelkes writes, quote, "The notion of lifelong, life-wide learning presupposes acknowledging the existence of very diverse sources of knowledge, many ways of knowing, and the need for dialogue as the principal method for ensuring both deep learning and personal and collective growth." Diversity, dialogue, and personal and collective growth. Isn't that precisely what we tell people we're about? So, to honor and engage our own pluralism and diversity, we need to practice epistemic justice, particularly toward members and would-be members who are outside what we sometimes view as our cultural mainstream. If I say something hurtful toward, say, a transgender person or a person of color or toward a woman, and I have done, it was unintentional, but even unintentionally, they should have the right to tell me, the right to contest. What are my good intentions worth if I don't practice listening justice and learning justice? To me, again, that's what accountability means in a covenantal relationship. And to me, that is an ethical call. As a totally Northern European descended lifelong member of the Mid-America vanilla set, I am called to be curious, to be interested in learning about people unlike myself. Covenantal accountability ethically calls me to listen to and learn from people unlike myself, particularly people on all the margins. And to me, if I practice that, all the pieces begin to fall into place. 200 years ago, Reverend William Ellery Channing was the leading Unitarian intellectual of his day, and he wrote a whole book on the hottest moral issue of his time, slavery. And frankly, I've read that book, and it's hard to read it today without gagging. Channing had good intentions. He opposed slavery, mostly on philosophical grounds, but he also accepted every rationalization for slavery that white slaveholders gave him. Brilliant though Channing was, it never occurred to him to ask an enslaved person what slavery was like for them. His good intentions fell on barren ground because he was still part of an American culture of domination in which enslaved people had no right to contest, no effective way to describe how they felt about slavery. William Ellery Channing, kind-hearted, well-intentioned, brilliant man, though he was, didn't think about what an enslaved person would know about their own lives that he didn't. And we 21st century Unitarian Universalists are not always immune to that. The Unitarian Universalist Association had a huge blow-up over unequal hiring practices back in 2017, and I submit that it blew up precisely because people of color at that time had no way to contest sloppy, unequal hiring practice. It was not about good intentions. We have the very best intentions. But the human condition is that, like Channing, we don't know what it is that we don't know until we give someone, often on the margins, an opportunity to tell us. Listening justice, learning justice, the right to contest. Those are important practices. To avoid a culture of domination, whether it's intentional or not, I need to pay attention when someone tells me how my actions affected their life. We need to help one another listen. In Scientific American Magazine's terms, we must stand up for the silenced and stand with the silence breakers, even when they're talking to us. Learning new stuff is actually one of the coolest things we human beings do. I love what happens when we take a hard look at how we've always done things and see where we could do better. In covenantal relationship terms with our own diversity, epistemic justice, listening justice, and learning justice give Unitarian Universalists a better handle on some of the stuff we've been groping at for decades, trying to better understand marginalized voices in the culture around us and also within our own tradition. Returning again to that Scientific American editorial, our national culture is rife with misinformation and miscommunication. Epistemic justice, listening justice, learning justice, information justice give us a language to explain how that is not okay. Our understanding of the world around us always is evolving, and we need to evolve with it. Society's biggest problems come when people refuse to adapt to new information. I'll say that again. Society's biggest problems come when people refuse to adapt to new information. 2 words: climate change. And that's epistemic justice, or injustice, in a nutshell. So here's to evolution. May we continue to evolve as our knowledge and language evolve. Amen. May it be so. Yep, y'all didn't have to applaud. I was just hoping you wouldn't throw anything. I invite you to stand and join in singing our closing hymn, number 1028, The Fire of Commitment.
Thank you.
In living through each moment, may we be ever mindful that we have been favored with precious gifts. We have eyes with which to peer into obscure corners. We have ears with which to listen to the stories of our fellow human beings. We have hands with which to work toward transformation. Together, surely, we are the answer that blows in the wind and rises in the sea. May we go forth in love, joy, and resolve, and may our steps soothe and bless the earth wherever we pass. Shalom, salam, blessed be, and amen.